A very good afternoon to you all and a warm welcome to this edition of the Citizens Chat Show, streaming on YouTube at Civic Space TV. My name is Judith Atim, and today we're talking about the recent capture of Goma by the M23 rebels, and we are asking what next after this, and also the implications of US President Donald Trump's aid freeze. And to discuss this topic, I am joined by my esteemed panelists from my immediate left, Dr. Robert Ojambo, head of the History Department at Kyambogo University. Always a pleasure to have you on the show, Doctor.
Glad to be here, and the show is now becoming feminine.
Which is a good thing. Yes.
The future is female.
Thank you, Dr. Ojambo. Next to Dr. Ojambo, of course, is Dr. Sarah Bireete, Executive Director, Center for Constitutional Governance. Warm welcome, Dr. Sarah.
Thank you, and good afternoon, viewers.
And also I have with me, as usual, Mr. Joseph Ochieno, political commentator, UPC Ideologue. How is your day today, Joseph?
I am in a fantastic shape, just as you guys, man. Yes, at last, the fantastic uncle, female. I'm flanked by my best friends, one of the studio and then the other one, the top lady of West Nile and the Republic of Uganda. And of course, the background team is predominantly female. So yes, the future is female.
Thank you, Joseph. And last but not least, and very happy to see her again, the Honorable Rose Obigah, Member of Parliament for Terego District, in West Nile. Good afternoon, Honorable.
Good afternoon, viewer. I'm happy to be here. And this is home, actually.
Can I say Happy New Year? We last
you last year. Happy New Year, and love you lots.
Yeah.
The people of Terego love you too.
Thank you.
Rose, we genuinely missed you here. Me, I was beginning to get moody, but fantastic to have you back.
I know, and you know, she started this show, then disappeared.
We're having her back. We're going to have you back. We're going to make you a
anymore.
regular.
Yeah.
Of course, we're talking about the recent developments, the capture of Goma City by the M23 rebels. That's the first issue we're going to focus on. But just a little bit of background and context to these developments. We woke up on Monday this week, the 27th of January. And then there was just news all over local media, global media, that the M23 rebels had taken over the city of Goma in North Kivu province in eastern DRC. There were reports of several people dying, about 25 on that day, more than 300 people injured, and hospitals flooded and not having capacity to actually deal with the influx of the injured. And this, of course, triggered an avalanche of problems, including an escalation of humanitarian crisis due to the mass displacement of civilians, including the most vulnerable, children, women, persons with disabilities, and so on. Of course, the M23 have always demanded an end to violence and discrimination against the Congolese Tutsi, many of whom are actually in that group, and also a safe return to the DRC for its members. A lot of things happened, like I said. Foreign embassies in Kinshasa were attacked, including the Ugandan embassy. A number of UN peacekeepers from several countries were also killed. Humanitarian agencies, including the World Food Programme, UNICEF, UNHCR, had to halt their activities because the environment had become extremely difficult and risky to operate in. Had become, but still is difficult. And of course, DRC, you may wonder why there's all this conflict. There are, of course, geostrategic and geopolitical reasons and importance to its neighbors, including Uganda, and also for the rest of the world, especially for those who are interested in Congo's vast mineral wealth. And because of that, the ESC current chair, that is Kenya's President William Ruto, offered to broker talks between the president of DRC, Felix Tshisekedi, and his Rwandan counterpart, Paul Kagame, but these talks are yet to be held. The UN has repeatedly accused Rwanda of backing the M23 rebels. Uganda too. In July 2024, a report by the UN group of experts on the DRC also stated that Ugandan army and intelligence officials were providing active support to the M23 rebel group. And the UN report also found that Uganda was tolerating the group's activities on its territory, with supplies and recruits coming through the country. It's time for us to now dive in. Quite a lot. I could go on and on and on, but you people are going to do a lot of the talking and analysis. But now I want us to discuss a few issues, of course, including the involvement of regional and international players in this conflict, the humanitarian crisis and protection of civilians, the long-term solutions to this conflict, and so many others, as we shall see. But before we get into this, I'd like to start with you, Dr. Robert Ojambo. You're the historian in the group. If you could just walk us a little back into history, into the past, and just give us a bit of historical and ethnic context of this conflict, just in about 4 minutes or so.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think the situation in DRC is pathetic, and it has been so for over 20 years. Since the fall of Mobutu, that place has never been settled. Okay, when Mobutu was there, at least there was a way, with the exception of Nalu and the other small rebellions at the border of Uganda and Rwanda, there was nothing very big. But after the fall of Mobutu, you remember the Kisangani 1, Kisangani 2, and for those who may not know, Kisangani is about 1,000 kilometers from Goma. But to come to this M23 issue, it all began with a small mutiny of soldiers who were in the Congolese National Army. It is abbreviated in French, so I may not go there. And at that time under General Ntaganda. And Ntaganda had a lot of issues he raised, because Ntaganda came up with very clear issues. It began with a feeling that they were not being given equal rights to participate in election. In fact, they alleged that Kabila had rigged the election. And because of that, he was using those forces to push out certain ethnicities out of the army and out of Congo. Of course, later, to cut the long story short, Ntaganda was in 2012, Ntaganda with the M23, they tried. He did not succeed, but with the, in fact, he succeeded in 2012, 2013. That was the first fall of Goma into M23. But the problem with this group, they have an army, but they don't have a political wing. So they overran Goma, but they did not have capacity of establishing a government there. And because of that, with the help of MONUC and the US, they were pushed out. Later, there were a number of other countries in Africa which came in and helped them. And in 2013, they were pushed out of Goma. They came to Uganda and they signed a peace deal after a very long negotiation. But the other thing they were complaining is that they were not given their ethnic freedom to run their affairs as people of Northern Kivu, who have a Rwandan heritage and the Tutsi in general, and that came to be that M23 first. Now M23-2 were in two forms. There was a group which was allegedly being supported by Uganda, and another group that was supported by, allegedly also supported by Rwanda under Colonel Makenga. And that is the group that has been notorious. I think Uganda, after a lot of complaint and our relationship with the Congo, they reduced a little bit and disappeared in oblivion. And that is the time we were even also having problems with Rwanda, where we had problems with Rwanda. They even closed the border between Uganda and Congo. And because of that, I think our president became a little bit sensible, and we have not been very present in this conflict. So the M23 of Rwanda alignment are the ones who have been pushing. And for me, we have discussed this matter here. I think the biggest problem is the weakness of President Tshisekedi. I think in diplomatic relations, he looks to be scoring 0. I remember East African Community came in to give him support when this issue had just started last year. The other year, 2023, through into 2024. But this gentleman thought that this was not a good idea, and he wanted to deal with SADC. And therefore, later, these people went, they even calmed down the situation. There was almost peace in that area, with now only just ethnic conflicts of the Mai Mai and other people. But unfortunately, the poor reading of Tshisekedi, me, I really think he's a pathetic man. Even Kabila may be better. He said East African community should leave. And indeed, the army of East Africa, which was being commandeered by Kenya mainly, and even Uganda was there, but mainly Kenya, had to leave. And they were supposed to be replaced by SADC forces. Of course, MONUC forces, those ones have been there. MONUSCO forces have been there, but they look like lullaby singers. They don't normally do much. So when we reached this extent, nobody expected that M23 would again come up with this force. So as you have given in your background, in a period of only 2 weeks, they have managed to overrun a lot of towns in northern Kivu, Goma inclusive. But again, what I want to say is that M23 does not have capacity to sustain that area. I know they are going to be pushed out because they have a weak political ground which they may not be able to stand. So that is a recipe for conflict in that area and causing trouble in that area. That is what I can say for now.
Thank you. Let me move on to you, Dr. Sarah. Time and again, when Uganda is accused of involvement, it always denies. The same happens to Rwanda. They seem to have a script that they stick to. When you look at these two countries and these accusations by the UN that they're actually involved, how do you think this complicates the situation in Congo in terms of finding a lasting solution to the conflict in that region?
Well, first of all is to underscore the fact that we are talking of a more than 3-decade conflict. 30, 40 years, almost since independence. The Zaire, now known as the Democratic Republic of Congo, has never been at peace after the assassination of their first Prime Minister, Patrice Lumumba. So we need to ask, what is the problem of Zaire or DRC? One is that it's a resource-rich country, and everybody is always eyeing those resources, either illegally, privately, or otherwise. And then you find a stakeholder who is not organized, or who is taken advantage of to keep the disorganization of Zaire. Because who benefits from conflict in DRC is what we need to map out. Is it just Uganda and Rwanda?
No.
Who are the beneficiaries of instability in DRC? Once you map out those stakeholders, legitimate and illegitimate, then you will know why DRC has never known peace since independence. Who is interested in the affairs of DRC? Who would stand to lose if DRC was stable and properly managing their resources? Who would lose? Of course, the people making money out of cheap resources. We saw a chain of mercenaries estimated at more than 500 leaving DRC. It's not that everybody was at war. Information shows that some of these whites who were captured by M23 as mercenaries were operating private airports.
True.
For extraction of mineral resource from Goma. So who are the actors in DRC? Who benefits from the underdevelopment of DRC? Once we map out those people and put them in the room, we shall find a solution for an ending conflict in DRC. M23 is a small issue of the conflict in DRC. When leaders take power in DRC, they also negotiate illegally for mineral wealth to cheat their country. There is no proper taxation. So if anybody is interested in addressing the conflict in DRC, address the resource management question, and then DRC will know peace. I am at pain every time seeing women and children carrying mattresses, walking, running away from their homes. Children, the bodies that were lying on the streets in Goma. Who will account for this mess? So when you come now and zero down the question, and I'm not exonerating Rwanda or Uganda, but I'm saying it's bigger than
Uganda and
Rwanda. So we need to get all these stakeholders in a room, or the way the mercenaries have moved in courts, push out everybody, non-Congolese, out of DRC. Put systems in place for taxation, for mineral exploitation, for resource management, and the presence of government. Of course, the region that we are talking about of Eastern DRC largely has an absence of government. I felt, so sad when the governor was murdered. He was among the first casualties in the capture of Goma. The governor of Goma, murdered by M23. So you look at an area ungoverned, 133 militias. Many of them are just for exploitation of minerals. They are not fighting for power, to take power. There are about 2 or 3 rebels among the 133 that are interested in the political question of DRC. The rest are outfits for stealing minerals. So that is the crisis that you need to address. Can M23 take control of this area that has 133 militias? No. So what is going to happen? Every time you will have a resurgence of the conflict, you will have a new face. The face today is M23. But 5-6 years ago, you had others, Laurent Nkunda and others, that were fighting in that region. So how do we address the changing face? Then when you look at the interests of Uganda and Rwanda, both countries have high levels of mineral resource in their exports now as part of the foreign exchange earnings. In Uganda, for the first 2-3 years, gold has surpassed coffee. Where is it coming from? In my area, we have a saying that if you want to know if your sheep goes missing, you check the certificates of the neighbor's dog. Then you will know what happened to your sheep. So where are these resources? Can we check the resource exportation stock of the neighboring countries to DRC? Can they tell us where these minerals are coming from? So we need to trace the resources of DRC. How are they moving? Who is moving them? That would answer for you why Rwanda and Uganda. Where is the gold that is #1 foreign exchange earner in Uganda coming from? And are we involved or not? And if we deny involvement, can we account for that gold? How is it coming?
I am coming to you, Honorable.
So then in this wave of the conflict, Rwanda has practically incriminated itself beyond reasonable doubt. Beyond reasonable doubt, Rwanda has provided camera evidence to the world that they are indeed M23. Why do I say so? The press conference of Kagame before the attack, where he famously said you can tell a difference between a leader and an idiot, and then he tried in that press conference to talk about the Uganda element of M23, saying the majority of these people were in Uganda. Why don't you ask Uganda how they left, and why are you blaming Rwanda? But that was a precursor for the aggression. to take over Chivu and Goma. But in these 3 days, everybody who surrenders to M23
Goes through
goes
Rwanda.
to
Rwanda.
Rwanda.
Yes, that's interesting.
So Rwanda has provided lasting evidence that they are M23.
Yes.
Because if I've handed over to M23, why am I going to Rwanda?
Why should they end
Why
up in
don't
Rwanda?
I stay in the liberated areas? Why do I have to pass the passage to Rwanda? You have the so-called mercenaries, whom I think are foreign people.
The Romanians,
Some
that's
of them-
280 Romanians. I
Yes,
think,
some
yeah,
of them
plus
could
others.
have been working for the Congolese army. Some of them could have been doing business. But they are estimated about 508. Rwanda. What are they doing there? Why is Rwanda the passage and the holding center of M23?
Very interesting.
This evidence will never go away. If you look at the people, the M23 commanders, I agree with the doctor that whereas it's their right to fight for their citizenship rights, those who are Congolese by origin, Congolese Tutsi, that are either called Banyamulenge or Banyarwanda, they have a right to enjoy their citizens' rights, but the political preparedness of that group does not exist. You need to import it. Even the speeches they've given to cameras and what, yes, they have rights, but they cannot take political leadership of that region. I doubt that they can even stabilize the Eastern DRC if they captured all of it. I doubt that they can stabilize it. So these are the elements that people need to address, and the missing gap in the Great Lakes region generally is the elder statesman's role. During the Burundi conflict, we had the visible role of the late Nelson Mandela.
And Nyerere.
When he passed on, Nyerere took over. Who has taken over from Nyerere in matters to do with peace in the region? I know that we have one retired president, Uhuru Kenyatta. He tried, but has he taken over from Nyerere? No. We have had other elder statesmen that would fit in Nyerere's shoes, like Museveni, who has refused to retire. If President Museveni was a retired leader, he would have played a visible role, more than even Mandela, in stabilizing the Great Lakes region. But they are part of the conflict. They are part of the aggressors. And unless we have that role of a visible elder in the region, maybe people need to look toward the SADC and get him back. And get him back to play a visible mediation role. This conflict cannot be solved by arms.
Thank you. And I am glad you actually go into, you provide this very critical insight into this conflict, and I want you to pick on from there, Joseph. Given, of course, this background that we have from Dr. Ojambo and Dr. Sarah, and all this geostrategic interests that we are seeing in the region, what do you think are the wider implications of this conflict beyond M23, but the conflict in Congo, just like Sarah put it? Because let's not now look at it just from the perspective of M23, beyond all these foreign interests and so on. What are the wider implications for the region and for the Congo itself?
It's really sad. I think, as particularly as Sarah said, but both of them, Sarah is Congo is literally a dining table for the exploitation of African resources. And it is sadly the case that I didn't know that I'm this old, because it's just nearly 30 years since some of us were using London as a base to actually lead as voices for the peoples of Congo, who were predominantly absent while women and children were being massacred in Congo. And if you went to the details, the culprits were predominantly not Congolese, and the clear evidence was that Congo was paying a price for its mineral wealth. I would like to suggest that the solution to Congo's problem, by and large, is going to be Congolese. But since independence, as Sarah said, with the assassination of Patrice Lumumba, we have people, including in Uganda, who boast by naming their children, and some of them actually even call themselves Lumumba. But they act in absolutely anti-Lumumbist manners. So if really African leaders thought that Lumumba was really one of them, the Congolese conflict would not only have been solved, but it never would have arisen. The earliest Uganda's intervention in Congo was by the first UPS administration, when Prime Minister Obote at the time sought to intervene in Congo. The intervention in Congo was to support Congolese liberation and help Congolese have and build capacity enough for them to be able to secure their country against the Belgian and particularly then the Anglo-American interests. And by way of doing that, secure their resources. And I must say that I also know now, more recently, from literature apparently, that Kwame Nkrumah and others, including Pan-Africanists who were basically Africans from the diaspora, particularly the Caribbeans, were already substantially involved leading to the assassination of Lumumba in supporting the stabilization of Congo. Why? As Sarah was saying, these African nationalist leaders saw the continent as a family home, but a family home that needed leadership, but a family home that also needed protection, meaning building a ring. That while nation states were getting independent, those that had attained independence needed to be supported and secured rather than exploited. We've ended up with a situation in Congo in which today the frank thing is the involvement of Uganda and and Rwanda, directly linked, one, to resources, but two, unfortunately, the blunt thing is that some of the interests that make M23 look like a specialist spoiled child, quote, liberation movement, almost akin to the rights of the Israelis when it comes to Middle East conflict. The only rebels whom you see nation states come and issue press statements and justify their presence. Paul Kagame tried to justify, and in a very decent way, a sympathy statement for the Congolese Tutsi, and is absolutely right to do so. But it's almost as if to also suggest that there are no Banyarwanda who are refugees in Congo who are Hutu, who do not have the confidence to return to Rwanda or to be part of Rwanda. Granted, Kagame refers to them as genociders, and it's true that many of them would have committed to genocide. Part of the African agenda is really to put Africa on the table, and in which case put also Congo on the table. You can't resolve, unfortunately, issues in Eastern DRC without looking at Rwanda itself. The Banyarwanda refugees, and these are the things that people just go ahead and fudge. The Banyarwanda refugees in Congo, and thankfully I was alive and an adult between October 1990, when Uganda invaded Rwanda and occupied Rwanda, and installed the Kagames. So we know what happened in Rwanda between Hutu and Batutsi. Are we saying one side killed the other? No, both sides killed others. Both sides did the killing terribly. So we need to deal with these things. So just as what I told you, Habiraman in 1983 or 84, or both, you will have to deal with your peoples. The reality is that Rwanda has got to settle Rwandese issues in Rwanda. Now, there is something cheeky about this justification about the suffering of the Tutsi in Congo. While I support it, and while I'm an African human rights activist, I have my Lu brethren in Kenya that have been substantially, in many cases, undermined and mistreated. Do you mobilize from Uganda? There is Baluo in Ethiopia. They are marginalized and their lands are being exploited, used and abused in Ethiopia. Do we mobilize Uganda and invade them? You know? So how far do we go? So the truth is, yes, Congo needs to be supported to build capacity as a nation state, the way we're trying to support them in the 60s. You know? But what it appears is that regional leaders, beyond the politics of gold, are trying to find a situation in which they want to go ahead and carve Congo. The irony is that from the Ugandans, in Mr. Museveni's case, who runs this thing called Pan-Africanism. You can't be a Pan-Africanist and invade Africa. You can't be a Pan-Africanist and break up Africa. You can't be a Pan-Africanist and become an agent of anti-Africanist forces, which is basically what seemingly both Uganda and Rwanda are doing in Congo. Now, the weak Congo state, yes, starts from, as I said, from the time when Patrice Lumumba was killed. Congo was never stable. As I said, we tried to support Congolese, Congolese nationalist rebels in Congo. But we were given Idi Amin. But at least we can say, you know, because I'm very proud of it, we supported it. But we're supporting the liberation of Congo, political liberation of Congo, so that Congolese people can manage their welfare, their affair. Mobutu was imposed, continued, supported against the interests of UPCs, the bad boys, and represented successful and bad boys over a 20-year period. Okay, include what the two comes, and we're being feared. So, what the young Ugandans don't understand is those are one of the reasons why, sir, why we are not particularly good citizens in good books in the sides of the world that want to exploit the sub-region. Now, when time comes for getting rid of Mobutu, what happens? Mr. Museveni sold this idea to the SADC leaders, who were then the powers, the Mandelas, that, you know, this Mobutu was the bad guy with the bad guys. We need to get rid of him. It has been reported very openly. In fact, Mugabe said, because some of these are things that you don't, how much do you say publicly? Museveni sold successfully to SADC leaders, the Mugabes and the Mandelas at the time, we need to get rid of Mobutu because Mobutu was the bad guy during the apartheid times, and you know. So they got rid of Mobutu. Do you know one of the reasons that nearly caused the Third World War nearly 30 years ago? The Mugabes were furious. This guy told us that we should get rid of Mobutu. We got rid of Mobutu and they installed Kabila Jr. Immediately went to install Kabila Jr. Turned out this guy's interest was more than removing Mobutu, hence bringing this other thing, which is the identity of the Tutsi Hutu kind of thing. Because these are things, subjects that people don't want to discuss. But these are the realities, you know. So how comes we ended up with the Kisangani? You know, it is evident that the hegemonic agenda of the Musevenis of the 70s is what is continuing in Congo, and people don't want to talk about it. Fast forward a few days ago, I was a guest on the Southern Africa Network, and I want to say that, well, I challenged President Mbeki on this. So where is Mbeki providing the leadership? Because South Africa ought to be providing the big leadership in these things. Now, the big leadership is not about finger pointing. The big leadership is creating an enabling environment, you know, for us to be able to discuss this so that we're able to resolve. And then finally, the bigger leadership will really have to be from the African Union. So that fast forward to all this day, we can see Congo being literally wrapped as a sovereign nation state, and people just watch like this. I think it's shameful. But you know what? The people who are suffering, and women and children, and I can tell you, I've got documentations of them as way back as 30 years ago. And I'm saying so proudly because I have ever submitted memoranda on behalf of the Congolese people way back 30 years ago when Congo was literally being occupied, used and abused by Rwanda and Uganda. British House of Lords, British Parliament, and all these major missions as the matters. We're trying to do those things. Not because we had particular interest. And sometimes people think we should say this because of political interest, because of our views and opinions about this. No. You can't be an African and be indifferent to what's happening in Congo.
Thank you. Thank you for your submission. I'll come to you, Honorable, and I want you to speak to the humanitarian situation in particular. You are a legislator. You represent women. And I'm sure you relate a lot to the suffering and plight of women, not just in your constituency, but also in Congo. And also, not to forget the fact that West Nile is actually very close, just at the border, and a very huge borderline, to be precise, between Uganda and Congo. And there's always this cross-border movement back and forth between Ugandans on the West Nile side and the other side. There's a crisis, a huge situation right now in Goma. Humanitarian agencies, I was watching the submissions to the UN the other day. and UNICEF is speaking, UNHCR, and they are really helpless. They want to get out there, help, provide the much needed humanitarian assistance to the people affected by the conflict, but their hands are tied. We have similar situations in West Nile with refugees. I don't know, from a policy legislative perspective, what your 2 cents would be like to the people in Goma, specifically when it comes to sending much needed humanitarian assistance to these communities, especially women, children, PWDs, and all these vulnerable groups of people.
Thank you. Before I can delve into that, allow me just clear something. As a truthful legislator, I want to invite all of you to find time and go to Kasese. This mining place is called Kilembe. Kilembe mineral place. I went there, I got shocked of myself. Actually, what you are seeing as a Ranjori mountain, 20% is deposit of gold. Gold, cobalt is 20%. Copper is actually now smaller. So as my sister, Dr. Bireete, is looking for where Uganda's gold is coming from, I personally went there, went into the tunnels. I did not even walk a quarter of the distance. But when I came out, I was swallowed by gold on my shoes.
Gold dust on your skin.
Dust, pardon?
Is that the gold we are picking?
I think, okay, we have gold deposit, a lot of it in this, Ranjori, a lot of it. We even have gold in Terego and Yumbe. They have been mining gold in Terego for over a year, until last week when I said, who are these Chinese who are found in Terego? Some ministers from West Nile are saying, that is my land. Is that how to mine gold when you are busy exploiting the community? And why didn't Honorable come out before I mentioned this? And the water is totally polluted. I think we have a lot of gold. But to say Congo's gold is being stolen by Uganda, I cannot say much, because I am aware that we have gold. I remember these Chinese who have been in Kilembe mines collected, can you imagine collecting samples as huge as this house in bags packed together? And 20% of all that is gold. And they said, this, how can a sample be the whole of this house? You wonder. They came to steal our gold to go, they want to go and study it in China. I want to thank government for blocking them. It's getting wasted there. That aside, honestly, me who has lived for over 20 years with refugees, we have refugees, by the way, from Congo, Ethiopia, South Sudan is the majority, all over. And West Nile, I don't know whether the current statistics is correct. 56% of the refugee population in this country is found in West Nile. On Saturday, I'll be appreciating all the first grade pupils from Terego with mattresses, books, suitcases, all scholastic materials. I provide not only for the host community, no. I provide also for the refugee children, because the UN agencies are reducing their funding. Right from when I joined Parliament, I have never left the refugees. This is because I first worked with the Red Cross and with the refugees. They are so traumatized, especially women and children. Even men, the men who managed to come through. Some sit by the door and others die just like that. You think somebody is still seated and the person has gone. It's a big trauma they go through. Congolese, we are actually, part of West Nile are Congolese. Me, my tribe is Congolese. Half of it is Sudanese. So the people suffering are actually my relatives. Two, we have a lot of cross-border marriage and relationship. We go to markets in Congo, they come to Uganda without showing our passports. We just walk in, walk out, do what you want. that said, you know, when you see a brother being slaughtered like a goat, the pain just goes inward. Those who cannot weep loudly, times you die quietly. It's just utter stupidity that Congo cannot realize that in this madness in which they are involved, killing each other, fighting, I don't know what they're fighting for. They're like the insects put in a bottle. You are biting each other. You don't know who has put you there. They cannot blame anyone for taking their natural resources. Because why have you decided to fight and leaving other countries take what belongs to you? Can't you quickly reason it and say, hey, let's come together? You cannot finish these resources. Just look at Mountain Rwenzori. Then turn and look at Karamoja. That very huge mountain has hell of gold deposits for Uganda. I was there.
It is.
Yeah.
Honorable, maybe just briefly. There's a report that Uganda has large volumes of gold everywhere. But are we exploiting it? Because if you check our data, half of our gold exports, a significant part of our gold exports are from outside Uganda. That is documented at Bank of
Even
Uganda.
South Africa.
Yes, it's outside Uganda. A significant part of our gold exports is from outside.
Thank you, Doctor. I'm just saying, because I sit on the Committee of Natural Resources now, we have a lot of investors in the names of gold.
Yeah.
So if you see what they collect per day, per hour, the number of children who have dropped out of school and are helping them to exploit this gold. How now it moves, I've never been in gold business. Actually, I fear gold business. I'm told it has a lot of evil, it can disappear. I don't want things that disappear. I want things I can retain. So I'm been scared before even I can touch it. But that aside, I think women and children have suffered enough. It's enough in Congo.
But how can help reach them under the circumstances?
Yeah, I'm just coming to that. At this point in time, you know, if Uganda goes to help, it's going to steal. But I don't think Uganda government should back up and say we are not helping. It's just that recently we got unfortunate statements from the first son, and then they said our embassy has been burnt because of that. But our embassy was burnt here in Kenya.
Also, the first
Yeah, but
son
he had also made
has threatened
statements.
to attack Kenya.
It also makes statements.
Yeah, yeah, don't made the crazy statement.
Yeah, so I don't know whether it's that statement or not, but again, Congo should not shift its responsibility to, I want to say, children and women should be allowed to find humanitarian aid. Congo, the rebels should understand that they themselves also have children. These women are their mothers and sisters. And my district, particularly Terego, will be willing for now to give home for the refugees if they can come through. The Congolese army and the rebels should give way, should give a corridor for the women and children to escape. Otherwise, they would have messed Congo. If you kill all your people, then some people from Uganda, from Rwanda will now escape to go and occupy. And they'll continue plundering into your resources. And whom you blame? If you're played with your food, if you have decided to give your children's food to the dogs, then you don't have to blame anyone. But for the sake of those suffering, I beg they should be released and they should move to the countries of their choice.
Thank you.
Just very quickly. You know, Mr. Museveni is on record as having said that Africans were stupid. That's why they were taken as slaves. And I thought that was a joke, just like I saw the other day, actually extraordinarily, Mr. Museveni's son, who happens also to be the CDF of Uganda, I was saying much earlier, actually being very apparent and boastful about the M23 as his Tutsi brethren. So I was trying to sugarcoat that, just for the record. So whatever is happening in Congo, and I can understand some of the difficulties, political difficulties, including for my sister, who was a member of parliament. Just for the disclaimer, and we understand that. No, the Kampala regime, just like a Gala regime, they are directly, in part, responsible. Not the people of Uganda, not the people of Rwanda. Responsible for the mess happening in Rwanda. Because then part of the argument would be that during apartheid, that we put up our hand and simply say those South Africans need to sort out themselves. No, Uganda, we did not. In fact, Uganda paid again with Idi Amin. Because the Milton Obotes, the Kwame Nkrumah, and the Milton Obotes, particularly the Kenneth Kaundas and others, said no. They pushed up to 1972. They were nearly about to break the British Commonwealth. Hence, the other side of Idi Amin. What is happening in Congo, as I said, is a weak state. We knew, because we risk blaming Congo for its natural resources, just because they're beauty and they're surrounded by crude rapists. We need to find a way in which we rescue these guys. So African leadership needs to emerge, and that's why I'm saying it should be from African Union. And one of the reasons I'm pushing Comrade particularly Ramaphosa, who holds the official office. Comrade Ramaphosa is my colleague. The African National Congress, a sister party of the Uganda Post Congress. But we gave our lives and blood to liberate their country, and we talk as colleagues. But at the moment, he's the elder statesman for the region with the power. Sarah suggested that actually Mr. Museveni ought to have been doing this thing as an elder statesman. But he's got his double interest, so we know that Museveni will not be able to do it. So it's an interesting part. In fact, if you see the other thing also coming from President Ruto, I ought to say this. Ruto seemed to have been speaking on behalf of one side rather than being a spokesman for the other side. And I don't want to speak as if I'm a spokesperson for the Congolese administration. Congo is a weak state since independence. From the killing of Patrice Lumumba, the Mobutus came in as agents of imperialism. From the pulling off of Mobutu, Uganda and Rwanda did not allow Congo to settle as an independent nation state, using Kabila 1, Kabila 2, Kabila 3, now Chikasedi. So what we need to do is to create an enabling environment for this nation state, respect their sovereignty, create an enabling environment in which they're able to build capacity. But yes, side by side with that, Congo needs to be held to account where it's known to be supporting Ugandan rebels, if true. Congo needs to be held to account where it's known to be supporting Rwandese rebels. But we cannot say that when we know Uganda is supporting a particular category in Congo and Rwanda is supporting a particular category in Congo, and the majority of the people in Congo suffering are women and children. And finally, just a quick one. It's really absolutely in the interest of we, particularly the neighbors of Congo. A stable Congo, just like my sister Rose is saying, we go and trade and come back. We go and dance Lingala and come back. We go and marry and come back. But that's when the Congo is stable. But finally,
or be married.
You go marry. And you can mine gold in Congo. I'd rather we go and mine the Congo, the gold in Congo, rather than Chinese, and Romanian mercenaries. So that's the African vision that our founding parents, of course, as you know, that I'm their permanent spokesperson, continue to hold.
Thank you, Joseph. Let me come back to you, Dr. Ojambo. Given this history of violence that you also shared with us earlier in your submission, involving these multiple armed groups, Sarah puts them at 130 something, yes. But there are publications that tell you they're probably 200 or even more, with shifting loyalties at the bat of an eyelid. What do you think would actually, what would it take to actually end this cycle of violence in DRC, not just the eastern part, but broadly across the country?
Yeah, of course, the Eastern DRC is the dangerous part of Congo. And just before I come to your question, let me just say two things about refugees. A few years ago, I did a study in Changwali, and it was depressing when I was profiling the refugees. They were telling me that they are refugees from Rwanda.
Yeah.
So they were refugees for the second time. They went to Congo. Congo, they have been pushed. Now they are in Uganda for the second time, especially the Hutu. Majority of the refugees in Changwali are of that type. She talked about West Nile. I think Bireete now is one of the biggest camps in Africa for refugees in Yumbe. Bireete is in Yumbe. When you go to Congo, sometimes people who don't know these conflicts joke. when the NLFC came back from Tanzania, the whole of Koboko was swept. You know, sweeping a town, UNLF, an army of Uganda, I'm fit from Tanzania. They swept the whole of Koboko. The only thing that remained there was St. Charles Lwanga Church. Even St. Charles Lwanga SS was, even the iron sheet were taken by Ugandans who were coming from Lango and Acholi. And all the people from Koboko had to go to Sudan or Congo as refugees. There is no young man of 40 years and above in Koboko who has not been a refugee. So is Terego and those other areas which were around Arua. And why was the thing? Everybody thought that somebody from West Nile was a meme, which was very, very bad. When I went recently there and I was profiling this, I felt very, very bad. So people who are joking with these matters, they are joking with people's lives. For example, Koboko is a funny town, 12 kilometers Sudan, 2 kilometers to Congo. And the majority of the people in Koboko tell you that their relatives are in Congo. And so is Terego, so is Aivu, and many of those places. When you come to Paida, the same case, in Budibujo, the same case, and so on. So Congo has a huge strip. Now, once this place is unstable, we are in real trouble. And therefore, there must be a solution. The biggest problem with Congo, I want to insist, is poor leadership. Congo, since Sarah said 1960, when Patrice Lumumba was assassinated, has never gotten a serious leader who puts together the country. I can tell you that the mineral resource in Congo is just slightly higher than that of Tanzania. Tanzania is the second wealthy resource in Africa. What you find in Congo, it is only coltan and a few minerals that are not in Tanzania. But the black charcoal, they are there. But why is Tanzania stable today? Tanzania is also quite big. Tanzania is as big as Kenya, Uganda, and Rwanda, you put together. But Tanzania has been able, because of the background that was created by Nyerere, whereby the country is stable from east, north, south, and west. Congo, the whole of the place is a bush, especially Eastern Congo. No roads connecting Kisangani to Bukavu, Goma, to any town around there. In fact, the transport in Congo was helicopter. That's why you see the first thing you have to do in a city is to create an airstrip where helicopters and planes will be landing. So I think for the last 10 years, for the first time on this show, I want to say that Yoweri Museveni has played a smart game in Congo for the last 10 years. And for me, we wouldn't be here to blame everything. He has been smarter than his colleague. In fact, my colleague in Rwanda has been very shambolic in ways doing things. What has Uganda done? Uganda has tried to play a statesman role. For example, many of us were complaining when Yoweri Museveni suggested, although it was done badly, but this connection of roads in Congo is a game changer. If we could have all East African countries, Rwanda, Tanzania, there were countries that border Congo, come up with that thing to connect these places with road network. These rebels are moving all over the place and attacking people because the only avenue to attack them, you have to use the Air Force. Because the roads are not there. You cannot move machinery from Kinshasa, not even from Kisangani to Goma, later on to Bukavu. There's a very big problem. So the first thing, if we had the East African community which was functional, the first thing we need to do in Congo is to construct road network. Then two, take children to school. Because these people, majority of them don't go to school. That's why you hear Mai Mai is fighting with Lendu. Lendu is fighting with this group of people. And sometimes they act as if they are barbaric. They even eat each other. That's what scares people. So before you even go to this M23, the ethnic groups themselves are very hostile to each other. Why? Because the level of education is very, very low. Number 3, these groups, East African Community, AU, although I was saying here in chorus that the AU seems to have collapsed. For sure these days, I don't know why whether the AU is there or it is not there. AU has all agencies, human rights agencies, humanitarian agencies, but they are absent. Ever since Gaddafi died, they are absent. Everybody is now just squabbling to see which place to control. And that's why for me, I don't believe in the thing of balkanization of Africa. Those days, people are supporting South Sudan to separate from Sudan. I think it is now the worst place, second to Congo. If, for example, UPDF withdrew from South Sudan, it would collapse in a night.
True.
In a night. South Sudan now is a terrible place. I was told now even in towns, business cannot take place. So the East African community, I think what Uhuru Kenyatta had started doing, but more importantly was Kikwete. You remember when Kikwete had put a stance against foreign intervention in Congo, and therefore they were not cooperating with Rwanda and Uganda because of their intervention in Congo. What really brought problems in the East African community, where this M23 story started, and Kikwete put up and said we are going to protect the government of Congo. And this, in fact, in 2012 and 2013, one of the reasons why M23 was defeated was because of Tanzania. Tanzanians and Tanzanian forces went there and supported. So I think we need again to think about the East African peacekeeping force to go in Congo. But for how long are they going to be there? But this peacekeeping force should be not there only to fight with armed men, to try and make road infrastructure, to try and put in place school systems and many other things. Then number 4 now. Number 4 is for the first time, I think we need UN also to be backed, at. UN has been a very big agent in making sure that this conflict continues. And one doubts, what does UN benefit from this? That's where you go to what Sarah was trying to say. These mercenaries who come under MONUSCO, because MONUSCO is the one protecting those groups, pretending that they're protecting AD supporters, but the planes are landing, they are picking coltan. Somebody did a study and discovered that it was after the fall of Mobutu that mobile phones became very, very popular. And they tried to trace it in Congo because Mobutu had not allowed them to take that mineral. Once Kabila came in, and now Tshisekedi, people should not think that I have problems with Tshisekedi, but I think he's worse. Finally, how do we help Congo to build their own systems? This was done to South Africa. South Africa today, you may think that they have come from Mars to run themselves and defeat apartheid. South Africans had a lot of problems, and they had the same problems like the Congolese, because they had been submerged by the apartheid rule. Through then OAU, which was strong, they came up with deliberate effort to pick serious South Africans, take them to Uganda, take them to Tanzania, take them to England, take them to many places. If you see these liberation fighters for South Africa, we are not common men like Makenga, who is just running around Goma with bullets all over his body. There were people who understood a national state, how it is a national state runs, how you run a government, how you need diplomatic relations, and so many things. And that's why the Mandelas had to spend a lot of time in Tanzania, in Uganda here, and their people being trained on how to run a state. Because there is no way people are just going to fight, remove this, put that, remove this, put that, if they don't have any serious idea of a national state. So me, I really think that it is a job that requires everybody. Finally, Sarah talked about great statesmen. I think there are no great statesmen in Africa anymore, because majority of the great statesmen who were here have now become businessmen. There is no African leader who is not a businessman. Like my friend Ruto is maybe even one of the worst. You remember when one time they had problems with Tshisekedi, where he was saying that these Congolese who are very stupid, let's produce a lot of milk and we sell them milk. And Tshisekedi said, no, stupid people are the ones buying your milk. We are not going to buy your milk. That's why recently when he invited, the meeting, Judith was supposed to be yesterday. Tshisekedi refused.
It happened actually.
Tshisekedi refused to be online. And therefore it created a situation. You cannot, Swahili have a saying that huwezi kunyoa mtu kama hayupo. You cannot cut somebody's hair when he's not there. So what Ruto was doing yesterday was like a barber trying to cut somebody's hair when he's not there. So we need a situation where you have Tshisekedi on table. This ragtagged M23 also need to be on table. So you cannot just discuss behind them and tell them what to do, because that's what we did in 2013 in Uganda. We thought that we would sit here in Kampala, come up with resolutions and only give them to use them. It does not work. We need to involve them.
Thank you very much, Dr. Robert Ojambo. It's time for us to take a break, but when we return, I'd like us to talk about a little bit about this issue still, the Congo situation, the issue of accountability and rule of law and so on, and then we'll delve after that into the implications of the U.S. aid freeze that was announced by President Donald Trump. This is the Citizens Chat Show. We'll be back shortly. See you then.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create, and publish digital media, or to access and use computers, other electronic devices, and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back from the break, and we're glad that you're still with us here on the Citizens Chat Show on Civic Space TV. My name is Judith Atim, and we're still continuing with our conversation on the topic, what next after the M23 capture of Goma? And shortly, we shall also be delving into the implications of the Donald Trump administration aid freeze. We shall be talking about that shortly. But before we go into that, we had finished with you, Dr. Ojambo.
Yeah.
Dr. Sarah, I want us to now talk about the issue of accountability. Earlier on, you actually posed a very pertinent question. Who will be held accountable for the dead bodies that we saw on the streets of Goma on Monday? The women, the children, the young men, and even the older men. And also, like Dr. Ojambo had earlier said, over the years, we've seen a lot of questions coming up about the relevance of these multilateral actors when it comes to addressing conflicts and crises, whether it's the AU at the regional level, whether it's the EAC at the small level. whether it's the United Nations at the global level, are these international or multilateral actors still relevant? Is there something missing? Can they do more? And how can they actually exert their powers and authority in terms of ensuring that there is accountability? In the question, in the Goma question, who will hold all these parties to the conflict accountable? The M23, the foreign mercenaries, even the DR Congo army itself, for all these violations and abuses of people's rights?
You know, I think first of all, we have to put the biggest responsibility to the Congolese people and the leadership of Congo. I mean, really, nobody owes them a living. Nobody owes them anything. So when a country is in a mess, yes, the international community get concerned because of matters of international peace and security and order, but also for human rights reasons. But otherwise, the sole responsibility to stabilize the DRC is the business of the Congolese people. So once they understand that it's their business to stabilize their country, and unfortunately, you know, the leadership, the post-independence leadership in DRC has really been an excuse of leaders. I think they've been unlucky. Like many other countries, they haven't got a transformational leader. And that's the missing link. If you look at the conduct of Mobutu Sese Seko, with his ordering a birthday cake from France, delivered by Concorde. Concorde was by then the most expensive you know, plane you could fly. And he's flying a plane to deliver birthday cake and whiskey and champagne from France. Really, what madness was that? Then you go from that Concorde kind of thing, from Mobutu you go to the overthrow, where now Rwanda, Uganda gets sucked in. The Kabila Senior, Kabila Junior, and all these rebel groups. You know, the joke about Kabila Senior is that he was shopped on the streets to read the liberation. And when he landed in Goma, there were strict instructions from one of the two leaders, the usual suspects, to not allow any journalist to interview him because he had no content. So he had no content, he had not been prepared, and I did not want that kind of embarrassment at the height of liberating Zaire then. So you have the rebel leader flew into the country, and he's surrounded. No journalists, no talking, as they try to brief him to understand the context, meaning that he did not own the movement, the process. Yeah. He did not own the process. He was just shocked to read, to give legitimacy to the process. So this was a plan of Rwanda and Uganda, and just flee. If you have an unstable neighbor, you cannot stabilize your country. National security extends to the security architecture of your neighbors.
True.
So when you have a country that is ungoverned, that is vast, that attracts everybody, like an attended to a beautiful girl at the village, so you have to mind that neighborhood because it's a risk to your stability. So I cannot say that Uganda and Rwanda then, having thought of stabilizing DRC was a mistake. What could have happened is what people call it, like the plunder of minerals and the rest. So you have Kabila Senior, then Kabila Junior after the assassination of the father. Kabila Junior seemed a bit stable.
Yeah.
I don't know why he never focused on social transformation, or at least the presence of government in every part, especially the Eastern DRC.
Where he comes from.
I don't know why. Because the first fundamental step that should happen in DRC is the presence of government in every part of the world. The issue of political exclusion is unfortunate, but also it's important to note that DRC has about 250 ethnic groups. So adding Banyamulenge wouldn't be the reason why it should fight for 30 years because they want to exclude Congolese of Tutsi origin. I mean, really, that is nonsense. And they are continuing to waste their time. They need to discuss integration of all citizens of DRC.
And that's all.
Even if they adopted new ones, we are here hosting how many refugees? We are a small country. Aren't we there?
And how many new tribes?
Yeah. So what is this population that you should fight for 30 years? I think really it is a lack of common sense on the part of leadership of DRC. Like Mwalimu Nyerere put the question clearly before the UN Security Council about 25 years ago or 30. There's that clip that has now gone viral. These tribes fall are shared among many communities. That's why you have the Awori in
Uganda,
Awori in Kenya. You have the Kasese, you have those people, they speak the same language. All border communities have shared people across borders. So there's nothing really strange about it.
May go to Kenya without passport. When I reach there, I'm a Kenyan.
How do you cross?
Just walk and cross.
Just like them, just like Honorable Trump.
Yeah, we
walk to
I am telling you the truth.
Just like I went to CIA the other day. That's why I'm saying that, you know, yeah.
You didn't use a passport. Did you use the borders?
No, and
For
I
me,
went officially.
for me, Sarah, I follow
I could do it.
custom.
The path.
The custom road.
Yes.
And I cross, nobody
On feet.
bothers on foot with my car several times.
Nobody asks you.
But
Why?
then, Sarah,
Because
no,
it's
Sarah,
a
Sarah.
short distance,
No,
right?
that is genuinely true. And it's genuinely natural. For me, obviously, I went formally, but I'm simply saying I could actually do it from
can-
that.
The Asikari is there, we speak the same language.
But
So
Sarah,
long as you
this
see
is
here our
basically
fula.
if you don't mind, Judith, this is basically to emphasize your point. Really, as a peoples, you know, when you really sink the entirety of this nonsense, it is actually possible for this community of nations to live side by side with everybody else in diversity.
So I don't see why Congo should go to war over politics of exclusion for years. You don't want Banyamulenge, you don't want this one. Who are you to choose at this time? People are born in that border, in that territorial boundary. Who are you to say you're not? You're not a citizen. So I think they need to move, have a presence of government, and address poverty. 70% of Congolese live below the poverty line with all the mineral wealth. It's also the poorest country. Address socio-economic transformation. The social protection services have health, focus on roads, create so that then you can benefit from your wealth, natural wealth. In the absence of that, every leader is just going to waste time on obvious issues and waste more time and resources as well as the resources of their neighbors.
Thank you. Let me move to you, Joseph. But also, as you come in, I also have a question. I think addressing the root cause of this conflict in Congo and across the region is something that we also need to perhaps reflect on. What would it take to actually have this come to fruition?
You know, really the bottom line as a continent is leadership. As Sarah and I sort of insinuated much earlier. I don't know where we're going to get just 10% of the brains of the leading leaders of independence Africa. Many of these guys were possibly not substantially schooled as much. Many of these guys were possibly not even substantially traveled, except the crewmen who had the experiences of racism in American train stations. You know, there is this thing about ownership of Africa, and the leadership today is absolutely absent. And so as we ask for that on the African continent, and as we look at ourselves, including the topic we're going to be discussing, the Trumps and others, as I said, how many of African leaders really care about what happens in Haiti? How many of them think about what happens in basically in Venezuela and perhaps Jamaica? But really, how many of African leaders genuinely think about what happens to Africans beyond their boundaries? Forget about conflicts. Those are the leaders we're looking for. But then number two, I think, as Sarah said, you know, Congo badly needs a big thinker leader. Like we argued in the 90s, because I come from this campaign group, thinking, including pushing for democracy in places like the Nigerians of these days. Those days, some friends of ours were in Nigeria said, no, it's impossible for Nigeria to be ruled by a non-soldier. And we're saying as young student activists at the time that no, we just need African thinkers. By and large, we hope Nigeria achieves that. You can see what's happening in Ghana. Big nation states, sophisticated, Nigeria, I'm not saying Uganda is not, South Africa is this day. The biggest, complicated, sophisticated nation state today on the continent is really Congo. Congo needs a big thinker leadership, but I think Congo urgently needs a roundtable national conversation, something I've written about. I think those days as well as New African column of mine on Out of Africa. Congo needs a big national conference enabled by neighbors and the entirety of the continent. Congo needs to recognize and question how what the Belgians did to them. Congo needs, maybe that could be the thing that brings them together. Congo needs to see what happens, as I said, post Lumumba and how Mobutu was used beyond that. Congo needs to realize that yes, whatever happens, we'll have to live side by side together in diversity. That is an urgent necessity in Congo. Unfortunately, by and large, yes, those kind of leadership have not emerged. Ironically, Tshisekedi's father was seen to be that opposition leader that pushed a little bit of an ideological strategic agenda. Somehow, national leadership was denied to him. Quickly, what are the regional leaders who at the moment have got interest in Congo got to do with this thing? The M23 that came to Uganda, how did they leave Uganda and why? I think Uganda needs to be held to account. Rwanda has got a strategic security concern that it always raises, including, as I said, the fact that the people who are the kith and kin being subjected to a marginalization in Congo. Fair enough, as I said, you can raise those, but I can also raise those of my siblings in Kenya and Sudan and Ethiopia, and including actually also in Congo, because I've got relatives in Congo of particular association. But I'm saying there are also Congolese Rwandese in Congo who are refugees. While we are asking for a national conference in Congo amongst the Congolese, we should also ask for a national conference in Rwanda that includes Banyarwanda refugees in Congo. Likewise, while we are asking as Ugandans about settlement in Congo, we also have Ugandans in Congo, including also fighting in Congo. We also need to have a national conference that must include Akiza Besigye and others who are actually suffering and languishing here. I'm saying as a continent, it's shameful that we can now have Trump to wake us up to the reality that we need to hold our leaders to account. And it's shameful that apparently the Trumps can actually wake us up to the reality that actually is possible. That away from these wastes, we can mobilize our strategic resources, including the one that our sister here was insinuating to, that we have sufficient resources, that sufficiently well mobilized and managed. Perhaps we do not need aid from World Health Organization.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Honorable, let me come to you one more time. Again, as a legislator, and I'm glad you also shared your heritage, which is partly Congolese and partly Ugandan. When you have conversations among yourselves, among your kin and kith on the other side, is there optimism that actually there can be an end to the conflict that we see rocking at the DRC? And that at some point in time, we'll actually get past this and people can live together harmoniously? And if so, what will it take to get there?
Yeah, thank you. You see, the world of Congo, their attitude is first of all very bad. Even when you are in a market situation with them, they don't operate normally. Somebody just stops thinking that you're a human being and can hack you. So yes, they are our relatives, it is true. But you see, Uganda has gone a long way in education, in learning how to socialize, how to operate as human beings. That is not it in Congo. you have entered and they know you, maybe your sister is married here and that's why you're here. And then somebody comes in the night and rapes all of you. So it's not safe at all. And this is a beastly way of living. It will take the whole of Africa to come together. And the way we realize it now, the better. Because
Would you say it's just a culture of violence that they have? Or
no, they have not been, you see, they have lived in war. I don't remember from the time I was born up to now, I don't remember a day when there's no war in Congo. These Congo, our relatives at the border and so forth, actually don't know Kinshasa and the rest. They know Arua, they know Kampala.
True.
So these ones, yes, you can push them. But as they keep bringing their police from inside, they are not human. You wouldn't want to live with them. Personally, I've gone to Congo several times because, just as I've told you, I have relatives who are married across. And they're from that side married this way. Functions take us together. But as you are entering Congo, just know you are on your own. At any time, anything will happen. So with this kind of human beings, honestly, first of all, we need to think the way they should have schools, they should have road constructions, they should start thinking like human beings. That's why rebels who want to continue with the atrocities go to Congo. Look at Kon. When Kon was pushed the wall, he ran to Congo. There is a conducive environment.
Yeah, the absence of government.
Yeah, they do anything. They live like wild animals. They live with wild animals. Wild animals can eat them. They can eat the wild animals. They can eat themselves. So what kind of government is this? The day they realize they're human beings, they can think better. It will be good for all of us. And I think Uganda and we who are in government should think better. Building the road network is not enough. You can't do business with people who don't think like human beings. So instead of thinking only of the 30% Congolese with whom we can do business, let's think about the bigger picture. There's 70%. Where are they? Are we going to leave them in that limbo? And then there will be a disservice to everyone. The day you arrive there, they will eat you up. So we should think about the 70%. And I think that is what we should be able to discuss in the corridors. But there's no corridor you can discuss with a Congolese. We travel with them in buses when they are coming in. At times, you know, what they do in the bus, you wonder. Somebody just puts water in the mouth and then pours in the bus. It goes on your leg. Oh, they don't mind. So, and they shout, they don't understand that you are dealing with
just a quick one. What would be your assessment of what she's describing?
Part of it I don't know. Part of it I've not experienced. Part of it I'm not surprised because
It's a sign of underdevelopment.
I am a refugee scholar
Backwardness.
and forced migration and conflict. Some of these are things that will pick from certain sections from South Sudan. But part of it may also not necessarily reflect the entire Congo, because I'm also related with Congolese, including Congolese professors, you know, particularly these were people without completely away from maybe our borderline Congolese communities.
The civilized, privileged Congolese would not definitely.
Indeed, I think what I was saying at the beginning, that's why it's urgently important, that as a continent, we need to wake up to realize that aspects of Congo's aspect of jiggers on our legs. So as a peoples, because to me I think that's the long-term answer, as a peoples, Congo needs to be helped. Congo needs to be supported. In other words, we need to be able to cleanse an aspect of Congo, just like we must cleanse an aspect of South Sudan, just like we have to cleanse an aspect of Uganda, in which we have a family that thinks they own the Republic of Uganda. And that's why we need to be able to cleanse aspects of Ethiopia in terms of whatever is happening down there. Now, for Congo particularly, as the richest country, the richest unit of Africa, is absolutely in Africa's interest.
Richest in the world.
You know, absolutely
Natural
resources.
Yes, indeed. Absolutely in the interest of the rest of Africa that we create an enabling environment in which we stabilize this, including addressing some of the cultural issues that Rose and others may be saying and experiencing, so that this then becomes our genuine basket. And then as a people's, possibly 30 years later, we're able to reap this. And hence, unfortunately, I say is hence, but unfortunately, we cannot do that without creating an enabling environment. We need people to bang tables at the African Union. We need people to bang tables in East Africa. We need people to bang tables at the SADC level. I found it interesting that the other day, President Ramaphosa seems to have issued a little bit of a signal. They may be beginning to have a political heavy conversation with President Kagame. I think this must appropriately happen. But as I said, where are the Congolese authorities on this? But beyond that, we need the Congolese civil society organizations. We need actually regional leaders beyond national polity to get involved on Congo. So meaning the Congo crisis is the African crisis of the future. Do you know what? In 1997, it nearly caused the first African World War. And by the way, it was just an inch, and I know the Musevenis know this, it was nearly an inch, for the thing to go the other way. And if it went, we don't know what would have happened in Kampala. Yeah.
Thank you. So now I want us to move on and go across the Atlantic, where the recent sneeze by the Donald Trump administration has sent cold shivers. Actually, the global south has caught a cold in the last week or so because of these announcements by the Trump administration. Last week, when we had a conversation here, we talked briefly about the executive orders he had issued at that time and the implications. And we didn't know we were going to be hit by an even more serious announcement just shortly afterwards. So, of course, Trump announced that they'll be freezing foreign aid, and this raised significant concerns across the global south, and in particular in Uganda. I want us to be context specific, and we'll focus a little on Uganda. And the concerns were raised especially regarding the health sector. And a primary focus was also on the potential impact on access to ARVs for HIV patients, which are critical for managing diseases and maintaining public health. But again, yesterday or Tuesday, we saw the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, issuing a waiver. And in this waiver, he says they are now allowing life-saving humanitarian assistance during this 90-day pause in foreign aid. And the waiver ensures that funding for essential medical supplies, including ARVs, as well as food, shelter, and other necessary services will not be affected by the freeze. Of course, this has been greeted with a lot of excitement. I think there were a few people you would talk to who were directly impacted by this were sounding so depressed. I think I had a phone call with one or two and it was really, really bad. And it is a welcome move. But of course, there are still concerns for other sectors, apart from this the sectors in the humanitarian space. Civil society organizations, for example, especially those that are focusing on governance issues, are equally affected by this 90-day freeze. Many have already laid off staff. They've suspended programs due to the ambiguity surrounding future funding. And of course, it is a precarious situation as we count down the 90 days. And the question is, what next? What will happen? It's not just CSO, the CSO sector that is affected, so many other sectors. And just a little bit of statistics that I would like to give. The USAID is, of course, the agency through which the American tax dollars are channeled to improve lives around the world. USAID has a presence in 158 countries, and it works in 29 sectors, including but not limited to government and civil society, emergency response, which is now not affected, HIV/AIDS now fine, basic health, maternal and child health, family planning, agriculture, developmental food aid or food security assistance, energy, environmental protection, conflict, peace and security, among others. In just 2023, these are the figures I got. The US government channeled more than $44 million through USAID to undertake development work globally. In the same year, it channeled more than $525 million towards development assistance to Uganda. I just want to hear your reactions when you were watching the news or you read or whichever channel you consumed that day. when the news came that, okay, there's a freeze on funding through USAID. I think you began to see all those press releases from USAID, this country and that country, and all the other actors that they're working with here in Uganda and elsewhere. What was your first reaction?
Yeah, you know, the good thing with the United States of America has one of the longest process of elections. By the time a president is elected, it is months, if not years. If somebody looked at the agenda for Trump when he was struggling to come back and how he was succeeding at every stage, one of the big elements in that agenda, Make America Great Again, was to reduce on the tax burden of Americans in the United States by reducing American expenditure elsewhere. And one of the key, Trump, the good thing where I like him, he does not hide. He mentioned Africa and other people. There's some group of people he just normally calls other people. And therefore, when you read that, some of us were very, very worried that once this man becomes a president, things are going to be hard. But what surprised me was the overwhelming support that he got in the United States. To an extent that for the first time in the history of America, this is a man who looks racist. He segregates people openly, but he got the highest support from the black dominated territories. And you were wondering, why? Why is this? And the thing he convinced the local person that is going to make the life of an American cheaper, manageable, and better. And he explained the things in layman's language. That's the other thing with the Trump. He did not put jargons and like the other presidents, Obama, and speak a lot of jargons and English. He spoke because of his low level of education. He is very good at speaking to the lower person. And therefore, for him to survive, he has to fulfill these things.
Exactly.
And unfortunately, they are now affecting us. And Judith, we should have learned a lesson when 2 years ago, after COVID, that things were not going to be the same, worsened by the anti-homosexual act, which later also brought us a lot of sanctions and the reduction in aid. So I think it is going to be a tough time in Africa generally, but in Uganda, as you have restricted us.
No,
because,
you're free.
Because our health system is one of the worst. Of course, my friend Mwenda normally disagrees with me. He thinks our health system is so superb, it has data, and I look at him, I tell him that for you want to eat data. You can keep your data. For us, we go to the hospitals and find life very difficult. I can just give you an example. One of the biggest diseases now in Uganda here is cancer. Cancer of different things. If you just want to know how pathetic the health system is, you go to the Cancer Institute at Mulago. You will really see that if aid is withdrawn, if aid is withdrawn completely from this Cancer Institute, we would be in big trouble because 90% of that Cancer Institute is aid-based. I was trying to dig, there is this government, there is that government, there is this government which is supporting this. Even where they have given us some machines for free, we have failed to install them, install them. So that creates a very big problem. Look at our referral system. Our referral system in Uganda. I've been telling somebody, some work I'm writing, a crisis without war in Uganda, and I was describing something that a referral system in Uganda is that go and die from elsewhere. When a doctor refers you from hospital A to hospital B, is in other words telling you, go and die from elsewhere. In fact, majority of the people reach Mulago Hospital when they are at the level of dying. especially those who are dealing with the terminal diseases, cancer, they are already at stage 4. If it is other these problems, they are really, so you just go to get a death certificate in hospital. So with all this, you have specifically talked about HIV/AIDS, and that's an area where the president and the government of NRM has boasted a lot that they have done a great deal. But the great deal has been because of the support that has been given by this aid. For example, Makerere University, or the Department of Health, the College of Health Sciences, is the biggest receiver of donor money in the whole of Africa in terms of grants for research and many other things. And the biggest percentage is on HIV/AIDS. That's why we thought that if we are serious, we would be the first country to find the treatment for AIDS, because it is Uganda and South Africa who are spearheading this. Zimbabwe was one of them, but Zimbabwe got problems. So you feel that when you look at the organizations that are funding these colleges and these others, if Trump really means what he's saying, because what I normally tell people is that the good thing with America, the state is stronger than the president. So Trump can have his feelings, but the Americans will have their way. So that is where you get the little hope that you expect to get. But it is a pathetic thing. Of course, the other day we talked about World Health Organization, which he has problems with. But I wanted to invite also Ugandans to start having problems with the World Health Organization. Because of some of the things that are not straightforward with them. But that should not be the issue now. Civil society. Judith, with the civil society, we don't want even to debate a lot. Just check with COVID-19 alone. Uganda has become a very difficult country now to live in, because civil society has really almost collapsed. There are few organizations which are struggling. The other week I heard so many people are being laid off because of a certain civil society, which I don't want to speak about on TV here, had closed business. So because of Uganda was boasting as a country which was growing in democracy, because of the thriving of the civil society. Because I told you last week that the organizations that are supposed to be in charge of civic duties in this country went on leave. That is the Uganda Human Rights and the Electoral Commission. They are on leave, permanent leave, never to come back.
Underfunded.
So the only civic bodies that had remained in this country were civil society organizations. They are the ones telling people about voting. They are the ones telling people about women emancipation. They are the ones which are telling people about primary health. They are the ones which are talking about human rights. So with the reduction of support of civil society, Ugandans, we have to prepare ourselves to a pure dictatorship. Because dictators fear at least civil society. Because civil societies will expose you. They will go and stage a show in New York when you are there, and life becomes very difficult for you. You remember this president of Cameroon and his parliamentarians, when they chased them from a conference there, they came and changed a lot of things. So I really feel that yes, as I end, we must prepare ourselves to live on our own. True. And that is through frugal management of things. Our budgeting system is very poor. And that's why you see Honorable is there. This is the only country in the world where you have supplementaries which are outside the law. They are not supplementaries.
Even
when I was
more
studying
than
economics
the
at
budget
Form
first.
5, a supplementary only comes on unforeseen issues or emergency. In Uganda, supplementary are ways of government.
Unforeseen and unavoidable.
Yes. Now in Uganda, supplementaries are
They
way to
even
do
include salaries.
salaries that is.
Doctor.
So I think, by the way, Rasara, you're laughing. I have given this example on a daily basis.
I am going to come back to you again, Dr. Ojambo. Let me move on to your colleagues. So, Dr. Sarah, of course, the civil society aspect of this conversation, I would like to hear your thoughts about this, because we're in civil society, and we know colleagues in this same space who've been severely affected by this. What does this mean for, say, the issue of governance and democracy? Looking at the context in which we are, we're just a few months shy of the next elections. What does this mean? Should this 90 days, should this go beyond the 90 days, or should we see a reduction after the 90 days, a reduction in what U.S. contributes to Uganda and to the rest of the world?
I think first I want to look at the significance, possible significance of Trump decrees, especially those which are outside the United States Constitution, because we are talking now of a sovereign state which has also right to do as it pleases.
Yeah.
The decree to freeze aid was declared unconstitutional by the Supreme Court of the United States under Nixon presidency. When Nixon came to power, he wanted to reevaluate the spending of the United States, or money from the United States people, the same way Trump wants to. But the Supreme Court then ruled that once money is appropriated and approved by the Senate, the president cannot reverse such money. All the assistance by the United States is appropriated through Senate channels.
That's what I said.
So whether now the United States Constitution can rule again, since the precedent is being violated, because one would assume that with such a decision, then nobody would think of freezing aid. You can reevaluate, you can, because all agreements have clauses for renegotiation after all. You can reevaluate, but freeze. So one would have assumed that illegally it's not attainable. But we are talking of an era that is where all checks and balances mechanisms in the United States are dominated by conservatives. You have the House of Commons, you have the Senate and the Supreme Court. All the three organs are dominated by the conservatives. So are the checks going to work or not? I know the Democrats who are in a minority at all spaces, we are trying to say you can't do this. But what will happen? So we will see if something will give, given that background. So the second significance of Trump decrees is major an announcement that there's a new sheriff in town. So you so you have this guy, and like his doctor said, we all saw his campaigns. Make America Great. People would have assumed that the worst they could prepare for was something similar to Trump won presidency. But we didn't experience this. So even under scenario building, if you talk now of civil society or any other sector, I don't think anybody could have foreseen such a complete freeze.
Yes.
So it was something unforeseeable. Is it legitimate? Yes, like President Uhuru Kenyatta said, this is money that doesn't belong to you. But when you engage in bilateral funding, in bilateral assistance, then there are contracts. There are contracts that have been severed now by this decree. So were there such a clause in these contracts? Can you sue? It's a grant. You might not sue. But these contracts have been violated. Because I don't think, as much as a government funding agreement can be terminated by government policy, but would it be such a fatal termination?
Really drastic.
Drastic termination? Can't it be communicated gradually? Because it's, if you are funded under government, a change in government policy can affect that funding. But how should it affect? The fourth aspect that you have is America and its role as a global policeman of the world, as a global, the global dominance will it cease to exist? Because you cannot say that I am the superpower of the world when that superpower is the one causing people who have been surviving on ARVs to die. So there is no superiority in making people suffer. So the magnanimity of America to say we are the world, will it still be under such circumstances? So it's good that the reports about a slight waiver on life-saving provisions has been attained.
Yeah.
I think that, yeah, Trump, you know, that the Trump administration did not think through all these repercussions. So it's good that such a thing has been availed. Also, if it is indeed a change of government policy, it should be a phased out process, gradual process of phasing out. You don't abruptly say, tomorrow there is no food. You know, there was such a drastic communication and they kept coming in.
Yeah.
Then you say, stop funding. Then they say, even the medication, don't supply if it's in store. So what do you want to do with this medicine? What? Is it a genocidal kind of measure? So some of these communications really were like non-American. It's not the America that we, as we know it. And I hope they will be moderated soon. It's okay to change policy. It's okay to change your mind. It's okay, but you don't get people on life support and say, switch off oxygen. I'm not paying.
Just want them dead.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, but the fallback position is that we should prepare. Personally, I think that every country worth their name should pay for 3 sectors: health, education, security. These 3 sectors should be a no-go area for donor funding. And Honorable MP, please, any country that cannot pay for its health, that cannot pay for its security, that cannot pay to educate its people, is not worth being called a country. So I wish every country could move to say, these 3 sectors, full funding. We will accept funding and co-funding in the other sectors. You can imagine the risk we run when you find that all the medical information of our security is in the hands of donors. That means that you don't have control over security of your country. People know the strength. For example, UPDF. People know the strength of UPDF, including who had flu the other week, who had what. This is making the country insecure, and we are not serious.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor. Joseph, let me come to you. When we had COVID, we thought that was the ultimate test to the resilience of our systems, whether it was healthcare, education, our social systems, and so on. And I think somehow, post-COVID, there has been some kind of laxity or reluctance, if I might say, because we can see this. During the COVID time, I think the buzzword was, oh, we need to build back stronger. That was the catchphrase everywhere. But somehow we haven't, because if we had, I don't think we would actually be panicking at this decision by Trump. What lessons do you think this executive orders and this freeze on foreign assistance funding means? What lessons should we actually be taking as Uganda and as the Global South, broadly speaking?
Why do you expect us to think when we're sleeping?
We need to think.
No.
We dream.
No, we're sleeping. We are possibly not even dreaming, because sometimes people dream loudly. And sometimes dreams can wake up people. And sometimes actually it's so bad that actually if we had been dreaming that, oh, Trump has landed, you know, Trump that we thought was our friend. Some guys in NRM think that Trump was a blessing to them because the nearest they could do, not you, the nearest they could do was because he's not going to touch us when we're beating up Besigye and the Kiza Aarons because he won't care about us. And some people officially believe Trump was going to be non-interventionist, but bang, Trump has done these things. So they're not even dreaming. We are basically, literally, a nation asleep. In a very interesting way, I was not actually going to take the perspective. And so sometimes when you say this, people might say, there goes Ochieno and this UPC-ness again. Sarah, you're absolutely right. At independence, our independence leaders, do you know what they said? That the enemies of the Republic of Uganda, yes, Congolese and that's Africa, the enemies are going to be three. Ignorance,
Disease.
poverty, and disease. Those are the enemies of Africa. So you have health and education. Interestingly, the security element is real. Again, I've written and I wrote on my New African column, and I keep referring to these things very deliberately because time and energy that lead you to thinking this normally are a result of crisis. That when you cannot guarantee your national security, and when you use your national security as fodder for business, for others, you become a nyampala. And so has been by and large generally Ugandan, and I had to really think very much about it from that perspective. And so if you then use, national security and actually capacity for national security as part of a deal, to be able to blackmail Anglo-America and others, you're not independent. I had actually seen it from that perspective. You compromise your national security. Yeah. So then, unfortunately, as a regime, this regime has lost it from the three perspectives that Sarah actually said. But that said, I must also say that ironically, one of the schools that we keep on boasting about as UPC, in terms of education, the earliest girl-child education, you ladies take this, we can't with the Toro girls, the Wanyanges and others. Part of the money from that built Toro girls as part of a national program was USAID money. Was USAID money. But then that said, with USAID as a critical element in our healthcare provisions, all of us are experiencing this, almost every sector that matters, particularly in our health services, have been by and large supported by this. So it's extraordinary that then when Trump comes, people actually thought Trump was the other. So this is possibly a major wake-up call that Trump comes and people were seeing Trump from homosexuality, people were seeing Trump from their dogmatic religious thing, people were seeing Trump from Anglo-American kind of thing from the other side of the sea. There were even people who saw Trump that there goes the Trump, we're going to be jealous because some of us have good friends who are boasting for us in Washington as Africans. Trump is going to chase them back to Kampala and they're going to suffer with us here like that. Some of them were simplistic and as simplistic as that, and you have conversations with people. And like you said, I have had several conversations and several phone calls from people who've been directly affected as this. And so the impact is actually huger than people thought. But how dare somebody thought that Trump policies was going to be a joke? But beyond that, Uhuru said it very, very well. Maybe this is the time for us to wake up and begin to review that where is our government in health? Where's our government in education? Where's our government in infrastructure? Where's our government in job creation? So is it that very dependent? So maybe for a regime that has been 39 years as in power, and still without aid, it cannot provide for the very basic health of the people. Maybe this is the national conversation that we're going to be able to have, and our friends like the Roses in the National Assembly. I don't know what tone of conversation is going to begin to be, we're going to have. But whatever the case, maybe the NGOs that are associated with budgeting et al., we are going to begin to have other conversations, simply say that what aspects of our money do we get from genuine gold? What aspect of that money that comes from genuine gold and the little bit of receipts that we get from service industry? How many of those go to our health? How many of those go to education? And then finally, how many of them also possibly even go to our national defense? And then from then, we begin to go frugal, I think as Sarah says. Do we want the same size of parliament? Do we give Parliament the same privilege that legislators do have without prejudice? But also then beyond that, when we're beginning to say that, well, we're going to begin to take responsibility and make sure that we make our fair share contributions in terms of the difficult moments. What does State House cut off? What does President's Office cut off? What does, quote, defense and classified and unclassified cut off? Maybe if we look from that perspective, we might begin to say that actually the guys who in part have contributed to giving Trump the image of the fact that Africa can just be at the other place where you wake up in the morning and just cut it off, are the very same guys who are partly contributing into the mess in which we are. And so that's really happened. So,
let me just give you some information for your hope.
Sorry.
There was a minister here, I mean not a minister, prime minister, who was one of the well-educated people in Uganda has ever produced. This man was a minister of public service and many others. He went in parliament, at the floor of parliament, and surprised many of us. Said he was really pleading to government to buy for ministers bigger vehicles. And they asked him, why? He said, the roads are potholed. So, I want to tell you that as things get bad and become tighter, that's when now there's going to be a jet waiting at Entebbe to take members of parliament for treatment in Nairobi, or to take ministers to wherever. They will not think about improving the ones which are here. Yeah. That's not the Ugandan way of doing it.
I have been reminded that we have 10 minutes
and
to
because
go.
of time, then I'll cut off the other point. The quick thing about COVID. Actually, when COVID happened, Sarah, I genuinely thought that COVID was a wake-up call for us, as an opportune moment to begin to invest in our health, to invest in health infrastructure, and to invest in research, and also to become frugal, and also to realize that the global north are global north, and we're just the other side of the world. But so wrong was I. I was wrong.
Thank you, Joseph. Honorable, let me come to you. And I'm glad you sit at the Committee of Natural Resources. And here we are talking about resources. I know you don't have the data or the figures overhead, but qualitatively speaking still, do we have enough natural resources? We know we are endowed. What is the management and exploitation of these resources like? And if they're well managed and well exploited, do you think as policymakers that we can get to a point where we can actually have enough, realize enough returns from these resources, financially speaking, that we can plow back and build back our systems, not build back because we don't pretty much have anything built, but at least plow back and build strong systems that are resilient, that can withstand some of these external shocks that we are beginning to see happen time again. COVID, Trump, we don't know what other shock we're going to actually go through in the future.
Thank you so much. Incidentally, I am not bothered about this pronouncement of Trump because I have seen Uganda from inside, from Parliament. I access so much document, that information. And I want to say this. You remember when we were looking for COVID treatment and we wanted this and that. Europe, America, UK said Africa will be last. What happened? Did we die? They died more, like flies. You see, some things happen for the better.
But we also didn't have a plan or systems in place. It was probably just a stroke of fate or just the hand of God. We were just on the lucky side of things.
In Uganda, we have a factory that manufactures this drug for HIV/AIDS. It's called
Cipla? No, which one?
This one, which people take every day. Then somewhere ARVs, and then people start giving it to pigs, chicken, and so forth. I want to say this: if Ugandans, if those who are in charge of these resources, civil servants, politicians, honestly produced these resources for the betterment of Uganda, we don't need anybody's
correct. Yes,
we don't. I've just told you. Ranjori Mountains, you have seen how many ranges It is. 20% of that ranges is gold. 20% is cobalt. We have iron ore there. We have copper. Leave that one. Go here to Karamoja. You have seen Moroto Mountains. Honestly, those ranges. What is coming from there? Cement. What? Mention them. We just need to cut. I think the president has not taken this seriously. Because no, because you see, people bring you information. I don't think my president entered those tunnels the way I did.
But also, not just to defend the president. He has people like you, policymakers. He has people who should do the work.
Soon we shall be in Chankwanzi. You see, when you go there and you find something, you should be good enough to let others know that we are here. Before I joined Natural Resources Committee, I didn't know. From that day, I stopped mourning. But now, I told you how Chinese wanted the whole of this house just to go and test. Really? Since when? Can you carry this house to China to see which machine we can use for purification, to see what? Rubbish. But I thank God they were stopped. Two, let me tell you, Trump is a joker. See the number of refugees Uganda is hosting. The little resources that we could use for Ugandans, I can tell you, is being shared by Ugandans and refugees. Go to Terego. The health center of, the biggest health center of Terego. The maternity ward, which delivers more than 70 women per day, only has 12 beds. And this big number are actually refugee women. Do you know, as a refugee, the only thing that can maybe settle you down is sex. And then they produce. They produce. And then we are feeding them. We are helping in. The humanitarian agencies are saying, we have cut down aid. Terego, can you come and make the roads in the refugee camps? Can you provide other amenities? Schools. 2 health centers have closed down. Partners have withdrawn. But I want to say, you know, when it gets tough, the tough should get going. We Ugandans are doing enough. If we only went for carbon credit alone, we will get this difference just like that. So we as Committee of Natural Resources must fight to get this money of carbon credit. It's another virgin area Uganda can benefit really from. Another area we can benefit from. We Ugandans, we are not like Ethiopians. I went to Ethiopia. I can just come in my shoes, stand by the roadside, I start begging. The way I look. But this is not with Ugandans. Ugandans are working hard. Like in Terego, this year I must give more than 800,000 cocoa seedlings. I've so far ferried 40 sacks, the big sacks of the pots. I'm busy potting. We should go outside our pockets, outside what government can do, and do more to save our people. If everybody thought of what I can do for myself. The other day I went to clear a container. You can't believe the number of containers carrying cocoa leaving this country. And this will be another way to get money, apart from coffee. So I'm not scared. I want to be honest with you. I'm not scared. I don't live in Trump's country. The Ugandans who are out there, if they come back, please don't feel chased. You're coming back home.
Thank you.
There's no place better than home.
Thank you.
Come home, let's join hands and build Uganda. Let's not lament 24 hours. No, let's do what is within our means and change our lives.
Thank you. Thank you. I am, in the interest of time, I think we will just, I'll just get your concluding remarks, although I would have still loved to have probably another 15 minutes because I still had some more questions that I wanted to ask, but I'll just ask you for your concluding remarks.
Today we have been talking about 2 related pertinent issues, the crisis in Congo vis-a-vis the crisis in the United States. And unfortunately, both of them affect us so dearly in Uganda here, because Congo is like one of the arm of the border of Africa. Once it is in trouble, the legs, which may be Uganda or Rwanda, may not be comfortable. So it is high time when we are discussing these matters of Congo, we need to be first of all serious. For me, I've sometimes looked at the unseriousness of how we handle this matter. You find government officials are just speaking without any emotions. And for the first time, I want to thank the president. He has managed this issue very well. The last 5 years, I have seen a disciplined Yoweri Museveni on the issues of Congo. He has been very, he has been very disciplined. He has been insulted and he has kept quiet. He has, the way he has, you can imagine up to now he has not yet even made a comment.
Except his Ministry of Defense, though.
Of course, the one of defense is a misnomer. We agreed to leave that one. Secondly, on the issue of Trump, Trump is a crisis because for the United States of America, he talked about Nixon. They thought that Nixon was going to be the last stupid president of US. They didn't know that Trump was somewhere. And the good thing with Nixon had a good Kissinger, the Secretary of State, who is labeled to have been one of the best. In other words, it was like having Idi Amin and probably Mahmoud Mamdan as his prime minister. We just need to learn how to live with this man. We need to learn how to live with him and also find other friends who can help us, but above all, to utilize our own resources. I have said on this show, there is no way Parliament, and Honorable, I'm really imploring you, there is no way you can give Magola, an individual, that man called Magola, we need to know which type of Ugandan he is, 673 billion shillings to construct a lab. Then you give Kyambogo University, and the other one is a supplementary budget, and you give Kyambogo University 138 billion to run a whole year. Which type of lab is this Magola constructing? You can imagine, Honorable, Kyambogo University, a whole year is run on 138 billion shillings to pay wages, everything, research, everything. Then you give Magola in a supplementary budget 673 billion to construct a lab in Kawempe.
Thank you.
Let's think twice.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor. Dr. Sarah, your concluding remarks, please.
I think it's urgent for the leaders in the East African community and the SADC, where the DRC is a member, to urgently fix the conflict situation in DRC. Most importantly for Africa also, in light of Trump decrees, to stop playing around with the sovereignty and wealth of the African people. Either develop Africa or step aside. There are so many competent Africans that can take this country forward.
True.
We have stagnated since independence. Africa has a leadership crisis. Either these leaders should wake up and know that they've wasted enough of our time and give room to competent people to lead Africa, or do the needful and get Africa out of the begging basket of the world.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sarah. Joseph?
It's very urgent that SADC leaders wake up to their responsibilities. South Africa primarily, Angola and Zimbabwe, those are the big leaders in SADC. They rescued DR Congo from occupation in the 90s. They need to be able to up their games and do so again. But it's also absolutely the responsibility of East African leaders to wake up to the reality that they should stop using us East Africans as their equipments, particularly when the leaders we know have got direct personal interest or sometimes chauvinist interest in their Congo. We want Congo's resources for Congolese people, and we want the next net beneficiaries for Congolese resources to be Africans rather than dubious friends of African dictators. On the broader scheme of things, I don't necessarily agree with Sarah on the question of African leaders. Uganda as a nation state from 1962 to 70 saw a net growth in every sector. In fact, the fastest, largest, highest growth in both economic, social, and political advancements, not disregarding the challenges that we had at the time. So it's actually possible when we have a leadership in this continent to grow. In the Obote II administration, within 4.5 years, this country saw a net growth, including the fastest increase of rise in the standard of living of people by 1984, notwithstanding the war we had in the bush. But you know what? The economic program that the Ugandan government had, I'm saying this for African very quickly, of 1981 to 91, on top of our manifesto, the IMF and World Bank came to us to buy this structural adjustment program. We refused. Do you know what? Because our 10-year program was envisaged that it could be sufficiently catered for by our national resources, because there's a drive that we're talking about. The government of the day then saw that it was possible for us to grow ourselves and push with only a limited aspect of aid and support, because we had come out from an Idi Amin regime and the destruction. Meaning our point is linked to what Rose is saying. As a continent, but particularly as Uganda, it is actually possible for us with the leadership, with the clarity of leadership for vision, with the absence of corruption, and with the absence of supporting one family and a few families in Uganda, taking billions and trillions, including dubious people like the Magolas that he's talking about, for us to be able to sustain ourselves as a country, but also as a continent. When we have the leadership, that is possible. It's possible for us to live without the Trumps of this world. It's possible.
Thank you very much. Yes, Honorable Ross.
I just want to echo to Trump that this dubious way of doing things does not really go well with the God he claims he serves. He should know that we have refugee communities, we have communities that suffer, and if he says the great America, in quotes, then he should be able to pull up the staggering nations, not to take it all and feel so big. And America has been built by slaves. These were Africans. So the America is boasting of, we built it for him anyway. But this does not mean that we want to live in his country. We only visit America the way his people visit us. There are so many Americans. We have American embassy. They have decided, can you imagine, to deprive Ugandans by readjusting their construction work? They came up to our roads. They build underground. We left them. So this does not mean they are God themselves. He should have learned his lesson when Americans died like chicken during COVID. And something worse will happen to them if they do not think about other nations that need their help. Lastly, the issue of supplementary budget. I want to agree with all of you. We members of parliament, we are not for these constant plenary sittings for supplementary budget. We have asked all entities, including State House, to budget at once. It is so embarrassing. You fail to explain yourself to the nation. Why every other day you are passing supplementary budgets? So therefore, I pray this coming financial year, it will do better. Lastly, honestly, before God, we have no reason to panic as a country. We have resources, and we need to put these resources to better use. And we promise Congo, if they can wake up, we should be able to float in the same boat. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that also brings us to the end of our discussion this day on the topic of the implications of the conflict by the implications of the M23 takeover of Goma in DRC, North Kivu specifically, and also the implications of the aid freeze announced by the Donald Trump administration. My name is Judith Atim, and thank you very much to my wonderful panelists, Dr. Robert Ojambo, Dr. Sarah Bireete, Mr. Joseph Ochieno, and to you, Honorable Obigah, for making time and for sharing your insights and critical analysis on this important issue. Thank you very much to you for watching. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe on this channel, Civic Space TV, and also follow our social channels on X, Facebook, and many others. My name is Judith Atim once again, and the Citizens Chat Show returns next week. Same time. Until then, bye-bye.